I don't look at people and see them as a race. I see them as my fellow American. And I know that's very offensive.
Take it there. Who gon' take it there? Who gon' take it there? Who gon' take it there? Electricity, 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 electricity. You know what's in the air.
All right, so Emma Vigeland did an appearance with Francesca Fiorentini on her show, and they've been doing that more recently. I think they're kind of partnering up a little bit more, which is cool. I like the two of them. And they discussed Ana Kasparian at length, because Ana Kasparian recently did this interview where she was talking about racism, and she kind of harkened back to 2020, the George Floyd movement, and was sort of talking about anti-white racism and how that was like a problem, and sort of retroactively talking about that, which a few different people talked about. I didn't find an opportunity to until now, because these two discussed it and went pretty hard on Ana Kasparian, which is interesting. Both of these two used to be friends with her, and Anna is the one of the three of them that has a much different position than she used to have, and is appealing to a much different audience now. So Emma and Francesca are approaching this from the pretty standard leftist position, which Ana Kasparian knows very well. She has been on that side of politics for long enough to know these arguments, but she's being very hard-headed about it, which I think better than anything reflects where she's going and the audience that she's aiming at, but also I think is an important aspect of what she's doing to deal with. If we're going to have this conversation about racism, systemic racism one way or the other, then it's important to understand what it is that she's going for and why it appeals in the first place. So here is Emma and Francesca talking a little bit about Ana Kasparian on racism.
The left, in the lead up to the 2024 election, guys, this immigration issue is really hurting the Democrats. They got to take it seriously. I got attacked. Okay, all right. Well, when you see the shift to the Republican Party, hopefully you'll wake up to the fact that we've made mistakes and maybe we can change. Maybe we can do better moving forward.
Who is we? Who is we? It's a little jarring to see the kind of shift back into the "we come on guys" thing when I don't think that she identifies with the left at all anymore.
She doesn't. But but again, that's how you build the brand, by saying you used to be on the left. So here Miriam is trying to talk about how race is important in class analysis. So here Miriam is basically trying to break that down for Anna.
The left were saying some pretty horrific things about terrible, bigoted or biased comments that were said about other groups of people. Like, you're not going to change the culture unless you're willing to reject all of that, right? And you don't want to see it directed at anyone.
I suppose, of course, and I hear you on that, but I suppose some other people might say, but within that working class, yes, the working class is screwed, but actually Black people are the most screwed of that group, right? That within that, it's not equally screwed. And similarly with affirmative action, your prospects as an Asian worker are not the same as a Black worker. And that's, statistically backed up, that when you see the numbers on unemployment, when you see the numbers on people applying for jobs and actually being successful, that reflects also race in addition to class. I mean, do you feel that, because a lot of people, I suppose, on the right today are sort of within this idea of, white lives matter, that we shouldn't talk about race, that actually race is, like you say, an impediment to kind of coalescing around more important issues as they might see it. Like there's a sort of, I think, desire to go back to a colorblind world, which, I'm not sure is going to serve the working class equally.
Well, let me ask you something. We did have affirmative action for many decades. Did it solve anything?
I mean, this fucking smile is absolutely killing me.
Affirmative action for many decades. Did it solve anything?
But don't you see some of that identitarianism on the right as well? Because I feel like there's a victimhood in the white identity narrative as well that we see today. This like, oh, woe us. We have been neglected for so long. We're now the oppressed group. We're the real minority. We're going to be replaced. I mean, I personally see echoes of that in a lot of the right-wing discourse. It's just like a different side of the coin, but it happens to be the one that holds power power. So to me, it feels much more dangerous.
Do you understand power,
kind of people
little girl?
who are disenfranchised, calling for, more power in society, whether they are doing that in terms that you agree with or not. But the other is literally cementing that power institutionally along the basis of race. I mean,
this is great.
The Trump administration just get rid of a whole bunch of black and brown senior military officials recently who were up for promotion? Wasn't this a thing?
They got rid of a bunch of military officials that probably raised some red flags about what Pete Hegseth wants to do in the Middle East. Definitely. There's no question.
What?
Yeah.
Wait. What? No, that's so okay. Pay attention, because that's not what she said. So Anna's deliberately not listening to this anti-DEI purge, and so says, yeah, they got rid of generals who were raising red flags about Iran.
That's not true. I have the article here. Since Trump returned to office in January last year, Pete Hegseth, the Rambustius, I've never seen that before, Defense Secretary, this is The Guardian, who made it his mission to remake a military ethos he denounced as woke, has fired or forcibly retired 24 generals and senior commanders with no performance-related reason given. About 60% have been black or female, an approach seemingly driven by the administration's proclaimed onslaught against DEI.
But at the end of the day, what pits us against each other the most are the elite, are those who steal money from every single one of our paychecks and funnel it to a foreign country so they can do atrocities, so they can expand their borders. Yes, I'm talking about Israel. I'm going to be honest with you.
Whoa.
I don't give a shit about race at all. At all. I don't think about it. I don't look at people and see them as a race. I see them as my fellow American. And I know that's very offensive to some.
I see them as my fellow HOA participant. I see them as I see them as people who guard in for me. I see them as people who I cross the street when they're walking towards me.
They're having a lot of fun with this, as well as, getting genuinely pretty worked up here because, like I said, they both know Anna, and Anna knows better than all of this. So the most, I think, pointed aspect of her political shift, especially in saying something like this, is that she has made the opposite argument, I don't know, probably 100 times at least. She knows very well what the argument against what she's saying is. And this journalist that she's talking to, Miriam Francois, I'm not super familiar with her, but she seems to have an interest in Muslim culture, the intersection of women in Muslim culture, especially in Europe, assimilation and that sort of thing. She's done a lot of reporting to that effect. She's a pretty prolific journalist and, has kind of the patience of a saint in this segment, does an excellent job of explaining this. But at the end of the day, she's kind of talking to a brick wall here, because Anna is purposely deciding that she wants to have a more obtuse and dumbed down perspective on this. And so, I can tell that this person holds Anna in pretty high regard, wants to have this constructive dialogue with her. But the thing is that Ana Kasparian feels that she is moving on from the argument that Miriam is making onto this thing that she's saying about being colorblind and I only see Americans and whatever. So the thing about that is that there's a lot of people out there that think that way. And Ana Kasparian knows that. And so she's shooting for those people. So there's a certain amount of people out there that what Anna's saying here sounds like common sense. And the truth of the matter is that what that does is it allows the systemic racism that we know is built into the system, and in many ways it was kind of a cultural victory won, right? It was impossible to deny the existence of systemic racism through the last, million years of the Trump era, and yet we now find ourselves at a position where not just right-wingers who have always wanted to deny systemic racism, but also people like Ana Kasparian who are now pivoting to the right are reemerging with, again, this simplified argument of saying, can't we just move past this issue of race? Even as Donald Trump is specifically going after DEI programs and affirmative action, as they mention here, as a way to reassert the imbalance that was already there before. And so this point about, has DEI policy worked? Emma and Francesca went over this pretty thoroughly in the segment, but I didn't include that part as much. But essentially, Cenk has made this argument on TYT a decent amount at this point, that he believes, DEI policies haven't been successful, that they're kind of divisive. And I think, there's mixed data on whether or not DEI initiatives, especially when it comes to like corporate programs and stuff, yield results, because those corporate programs a lot of times are bullshit. And that is what Jank is referring to when he talked about that, or at least what he has reference to. But when it comes to, government hiring, or essentially putting attention into hiring or consideration in certain areas that it wouldn't have been considered before, has definitely increased opportunity for women, black people, minority groups of all kinds. And so, these programs are not perfect. And I personally think usually a better solution is to try to cut red tape wherever you can for people, for example, with undocumented immigrants or people from other countries. Reducing the amount of paperwork they have to do to get a job, for example, or to excel at that job is one of the ways that you can help people get ahead. And the same applies to people who are kind of disenfranchised from coming from impoverished neighborhoods and that sort of thing. So I think that the less cumbersome you make government for poor individuals who are trying to pull themselves up, and the more restrictions you place on larger companies and entities to exploit those people, and rather forcing those entities to have ladders, to institute ladders so that poor people can use the resources those companies have to pull themselves up. I think that is the only thing that you can do to combat what we do know statistically is there, which is inequality in hiring patterns. Based on the way human behavior works, if humans unchecked in these various systems that they're in, jobs, private sector, public sector, unchecked, they will favor people who kind of look like themselves. And so over many, many decades of American society and iterations of the government, what that has led to is layers and layers and layers of reinforcement of what they call whiteness, right? Like white people in positions of power or just being more favored for jobs. So this is something that was built into the system for a long time. It's true to say that it was now several years ago that we started addressing these problems, a few decades ago, in fact, that policies started being put into place to correct some of these balances. Did the balances get 100% corrected, or did these problems get solved from the root? No, because these are not root cause solutions, and I'll grant that. I do think that it is fair to criticize the idea of looking at everything in terms of a quota of how many people of every different type of race is supposed to be in a certain job or a certain sector. And, to an extent, once you get to a certain place with that thinking, it becomes kind of planned economy-esque, right? Like you're deciding which demographics of the population are going to be employed to what extent, yada yada. So when the right-wingers run away with the concept with it in that direction, in a sense, I get what they're saying. But that's what Ana Kasparian is allowing them to do without offering the counter argument when she says, look, can't we just stop talking about race? I don't want to talk about race anymore. Because what she knows as somebody who was in left politics for a long time is that your job as somebody on the left explaining the left-wing argument is not necessarily to dumb it down for people. You want to make this stuff as simple as possible, but the point is that some things might be a little bit counterintuitive. And so one thing that they didn't cover specifically in this, the quote that got a lot of attention that Ana Kasparian said here, was saying that she felt like there was a lot of anti-white racism during the George Floyd era, and that she viewed that as a problem. And I mean, I don't even know. She wasn't pointing to any specific. That's the thing, is like these criticisms of the left, even at their most valid, a lot of times it is just a gesture to like tweets that you saw from someone or something. At best, like an article that somebody wrote. And while these things do have cultural power, and it's just because one person tweeted it doesn't mean only one person agrees with that, it's still, you're focusing on that, the personal grievance, which is ironic that Ana Kasparian brings up in the course of this conversation. You're focusing on that rather than the systemic issue, which it is in fact the leftist job to bring attention to. And this thing that Ana keeps saying about how we need to focus on class and not race and not these other things, that's all a distraction from class. I mean, that's true, and people have been saying that for a long time. I struggle to see where exactly the class focus is in Ana's approach. Focusing on class is specifically left-wing. And there are positions that you could take on the left where you could say, oh, I'm economically left. I don't agree with any of the identity politics stuff. There are people who believe that. But if you're going to say class, it's about class warfare. But then you're going to say, oh, I don't want anything to do with the left, and they're ideologically captured and it's too radical. Trying to appeal to the populist right on this basis of class and class warfare. But that's not what they're after. The right is trying to find a way to appease the lower class in a way that still continues to prop up the higher class. And anybody, the best utilitarian on the right, Tucker Carlson or whoever else, is only going to do that. They are simply not going to engage in any type of class warfare to take from the rich and redistribute to the poor. That's obviously left-wing ideology. Ana Kasparian knows that. So when she says the class thing, she's really using it as a dodge. She's trying to dodge back to a position that she views as being something that like her average middle American audience relates to more. Well, I don't want to talk about this race stuff. Let's talk about class. And I do think that it's wise for people who genuinely are on the left and have a coherent left critique to recognize the utility of what she's doing by saying, let's stop with this quibbling about the definition of racism and move on to this issue of class. And so while I think that she is doing her audience a disservice by trying to downplay the issue of racism, I also think that she's right that there is a large amount of people out there who want to move on to a different type of systemic critique. And while it talks about racism and about inequality have to come into that, like the dismantling of DEI and the reassertion of the inequality that will come after that is only going to play into these class dynamics that are the foundation of any type of political change we hope to see. And that's why divorcing this issue of class from race is actually doing yourself a disservice when it comes to being able to seize on the momentum that will come for that issue in the near future. It's not going to be whites who are disillusioned because they can't get a girlfriend that are at the forefront of the class war. It's going to be the black people of this country, the immigrants of this country, the truly downtrodden of this country are going to be the ones that are able and equipped to actually fight for class redistribution, etc. And that's because they're the ones who have been on the forefront of it this whole time. And that it does include poor white people as well. And the reactionaries are going to pursue a bunch of destructive non-solutions in the meantime to try to make that class warfare more impossible for the actual lower and working class. And so that's the project that Ana Kasparian is contributing to right now, whether she knows it or not, because she is propping up these right-wing figures. She's propping up this right-wing fake populist argument as a solution for these class problems that she is pointing out. She's pointing away from racism and towards class, but then pointing away from class critique towards right-wing populist slop critique. And that's why this quote-unquote coalition that Ana Kasparian is trying to build or pretending to try to build isn't going to last, because it's not based on a coherent class critique. And that's what I've been saying about Cenk as well, is that these people that you're trying to organize with on the basis of being anti-establishment, they don't have the same idea of what the establishment is. They think the establishment is Jews and like Democrats and, you know, scientists. Like that's their view of the establishment. And so if you're going to try to grab people like that and pull them into a class conscious movement, that's great. You have to explain to them how those kind of things work. And the impulse to skip over the issue of racism and how that plays into these class dynamics, especially when you're speaking to a white audience, is the same impulse that's going to cause you to skip right over that class issue when the class issue inevitably becomes more racial in the near future and it becomes politically prudent for you to focus on something else instead.